Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and a doctoral student of psychology. Today, I want to talk about when an avoidant silently decides that you're the one. Most people do misinterpret the stage. When I mean silently, I mean that they are doing this subconsciously and even consciously, but you might not be aware of it because it's not like they're directly stating it. They have processed and they're processing the relationship, what it needs to get to a more stable point, but also what it takes for them because they've decided you're the one, what they need to do next. Because deciding you're the one is not just a happy feeling. It's a mixed feeling because it also means responsibility because avoidance, they already know to some extent that they're not fully comfortable with showing up emotionally, and deciding that you're the one means that they do have to make some decisions. They do have to change some things. So it's a mixed feeling. So that's why you guys might misinterpret this stage. For male avoidance, this stage typically takes less time than female avoidance. Female avoidance, I'm being honest with you, sometimes can be in the stage for years. And the reason why is because females in general have a little bit more to risk when it comes to being in a relationship biologically, right? If you're pregnant and your husband abandons you, it's more difficult because you're the one carrying the baby. That's just from a biological perspective. And so females in general take a little bit longer to decide these things. Males, especially with male avoidance, for example, they can decide sometimes within a day. Sometimes it doesn't take that quickly, but it usually does happen because as long as there are certain things checked off for a male avoidance, for example, that's fine. Then they're okay with it. For female avoidance, they have those things, but they also have to make sure, is it safe? Can I trust you? Potentially, if you guys want children, are you going to be safe? Like, are you going to protect me when I'm pregnant? Not that they realize that's what's happening, but a lot of times that's where some of these things come from. So just keep that in mind. So what does this actually look like? What does this stage that we're talking about look like? It actually shows up as a little bit more distant. Not by much, but a little bit. Like I had mentioned, if an avoidant male is deciding you're the one for like a week, they're just distant for that week. It doesn't mean they're not talking. It might, but there is a little bit of distance, and you will see that. There's less focused on physical intimacy. This might be for a while because both male and female avoidance, physical intimacy when they fall in love becomes much more important and more serious. And so actually they pull away from physical intimacy because it's going to be more romantic, which can be a little bit more pressure. But also they don't just see you as a physical person. And so it's not the mechanics of the physical intimacy, it's the romance of physical intimacy, which can sometimes be less often or less common for them to want because it's a powerful emotion. However, it's more desirable for them because it's a more loving aspect. It's almost like a romantic date. A very physical romantic date is how they feel like it is now. Whereas at first they just thought it was like something they had to do or just getting to know each other or the physical aspects, like the physical mechanics. But now it's a little bit more emotional, sometimes a bit more pressure, but it's also more romantic. And so there's going to be a less focus on physical intimacy. They're more focused on their true selves, which can sometimes mean more maladaptive strategies. It shows how much work they need to do on themselves, to be honest, and they often isolate themselves. So you're going to see that more maladaptive behaviors. For example, some female avoidants, they're very rigid about like food and eating, and then male avoidants, sometimes they have that, but I've seen like male avoidants be more rigid with like exercise and like cleanliness. Female avoidance too, but like they are really careful if you like drop something on the stove or something and they quickly clean it. And so you might see a lot of these controlling behaviors, the way they control their life. You're going to start seeing that. And we're going to talk about what they're assessing and then how we can kind of resolve those things as well. But before that we do, I wanted to let you know if you guys want to see me and work on some of these problems regarding your particular relationship, you want to heal things with your husband, your wife, with your girlfriend, or just a person that's kind of keeping you in the friend zone, but you feel like there's something romantic and you want to talk about it with me so that we can kind of discuss what to do next, you absolutely can. I have slots available. The link will be in the description box, but it's also going to be in the pinned comments. And so if you guys want to take advantage of that, that is absolutely available. So what are they assessing while they're being silent? Do you have a compatible lifestyle to theirs? And so that compatibility could be, are you a morning person? And is that something important, right? A lot of patients, actually, regardless of attachment style, but more particular with avoidance, they tend to say like, what time this person wakes up, how long they're staying late they stay out late. Avoidants really worry about these things or are concerned about these things because a lot of avoidants, they tend to be like a morning person because they like to wake up and work. Like, I'm just being honest. They like to be prepared for their job. They like to come home after work and set things up for their job. So they're typically not going to prefer schedules where it's like noon to midnight. They tend to prefer schedules like 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. That's a preferred schedule for avoidance. Not always the time. Not always the case, but they tend to check that. And so they want to just make sure you fit that. You don't have to be exactly like them, but they don't want it to be where you guys are complete opposite schedules. That's an example. The next one is, can you manage some disappointment in the relationship without breaking up? This one's so important. I probably should have put it first. But you're going to be disappointed in them because they're still trying to heal their attachment style and their identity, the maladaptive parts. And if you break up with them, they can't do that, and they're going to actually end up with a broken heart. And so they want to see that you can still stay and be there for them while they're healing. That doesn't mean you tolerate everything, but if they're overall a reasonable person and they just have some maladaptive issues, you set those boundaries, you set those expectations. You are disappointed. You can say you're disappointed, but you're not going to break up with them, not until something crosses a line or you don't see change. That's more like what they are expecting and wanting to see. The next one is, can you communicate what you want instead of by indirect means? So if you give them silent treatment, if you are telling them they should know better, it's your anniversary, how do they not know that you want flowers? They probably don't know. They might think happy anniversary is enough. Or they might not know if you're an anniversary person because they're not an anniversary person. So mention, this is what I want specifically. Even to the point where I want you to give me flowers on Valentine's Day and mail it to my house. If you miss me when you're on vacation, I want you to tell me I miss you. I know people don't like that, but being specific is very important. Now, eventually, they will be able to do it without you giving specific instructions, but usually they need that specific instruction set up. The next one is, can you acknowledge their efforts? I appreciate that you gave me flowers. Thank you for telling me you miss me. I can see how much you're changing for our relationship. Now, the next 3 points is what they're looking at themselves. So it's not really something you can do, but they need to evaluate this. Can they give you some of the things that you are asking for? And the only thing that you can do is just be mindful of what you're asking in terms of timing. The speed that you see in the relationship for yourself is going to be quicker than their speed. So maybe you want to get married in 1 year. They might not be ready until year 3. An example, to be honest, I'll be really honest with you, it's more like year 7. Sometimes it's year 3, but it's usually going to be like year 7, year 6 and 7. It's going to take a long time. And so can they give you that? Can they meet you in the middle? You want year 1, they want year 7. Can they give you year 3? Can they give you year 5? They're trying to figure that out. And for you to manage that, maybe you can be like, you know what, I'm flexible. Maybe I don't need year 1, but I need some sort of promise by year 2. I need some sort of conversation about it by year 2 or 3. Maybe that's your flexibility. If you can be more flexible at this, it can help them to decide as well. I'm not saying let it go completely because they need to learn to compromise, but it's just an example. The next one is, can they compromise to some extent? This one's really important. You have to give them opportunities to compromise. You can say, I'm willing to do that. Can you meet me here? Let them show you. They need to be able to compromise, and they need to see this one. And the last one is, can they keep promises to you? And the only way they can check that is if you give them areas they need to promise. So you have to give them that stuff. It doesn't have to be promise me, but you can say, can you do this when you're on vacation? Can you buy me a gift when you're out of town? Something like that. It's very, very important, okay? And so what are they assessing? Let's summarize and we'll wrap it up. Do you have a compatible lifestyle? Can you manage that disappointment without breaking up? Can you communicate directly? Can you acknowledge their efforts? Can they give you the things that you're asking for? At least some of them. Can they compromise? And can they keep their promises? I hope this video is helpful to somebody. Please like, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.
Avoidant individuals rarely fall in love in loud, dramatic, or obvious ways. Unlike people who openly express intense emotions early on, avoidants tend to move carefully and quietly when they start developing deep feelings for someone. Their emotional world is often guarded, not because they do not care, but because vulnerability can feel uncomfortable or even risky to them. As a result, their version of love is usually expressed through steady actions rather than emotional speeches or grand romantic gestures. One of the first signs is consistency. An avoidant person who once seemed distant may begin replying more reliably, checking in without being asked, or making a visible effort to stay connected. These changes may appear small to others, but for someone who values emotional independence and personal space, they are significant. Consistency becomes their way of saying, "You matter to me." They may also begin sharing small personal details that they normally keep private. Instead of talking only about surface-level topics, they slowly reveal stories, opinions, fears, routines, or memories. This gradual openness is important because avoidants do not easily let people into their inner world. Every small disclosure reflects growing trust and emotional safety. Another powerful sign is when they start making space for someone in their daily life. They include that person in plans, adjust routines, or become more emotionally available over time. It may not look dramatic from the outside, but internally it represents a major shift. Avoidants value control over their environment, so allowing another person into that space often signals deep attachment. Unfortunately, many people misunderstand this stage. Because the behavior feels calm and subtle, it is often dismissed as simple comfort or convenience. But for avoidants, calmness can actually represent emotional security and commitment. Their love is often quiet, steady, and action-based. What looks ordinary to others may actually be one of the deepest forms of connection they know how to give. Avoidant individuals often experience emotions deeply, but instead of expressing those feelings openly and immediately, they tend to process everything internally. While many people talk through emotions to feel closer and reassured, avoidants usually retreat inward to understand what they are feeling before they share it. This internal processing can make them appear distant or emotionally detached, even when they are experiencing intense attachment beneath the surface. When an avoidant person begins realizing that someone may truly matter to them, or could even be the one, their behavior often changes in subtle but confusing ways. Rather than becoming more emotionally expressive overnight, they may actually grow quieter, more observant, or more cautious. This happens because the relationship suddenly feels emotionally significant. The deeper the connection becomes, the more vulnerable they feel, and vulnerability is something avoidants naturally struggle with. At this stage, their mind becomes highly active. They may overthink conversations, analyze their feelings privately, and become more careful with their actions because they do not want to lose control emotionally. Instead of rushing into declarations of love, they slow down and become intentional. To outsiders, this shift can look like hesitation, emotional withdrawal, or loss of interest. A partner may wonder, why are they becoming distant right when things are getting closer? But in many cases, the opposite is true. For avoidants, emotional seriousness often creates fear alongside affection. The connection now carries real emotional risk. They may worry about dependence, rejection, loss of freedom, or the possibility of getting hurt. As a result, they instinctively become more guarded while trying to internally manage emotions they are not fully comfortable expressing. This is why avoidants are frequently misunderstood during the commitment stage. People often expect love to look louder, more expressive, and more emotionally obvious. But avoidants may communicate love through reflection, caution, and emotional presence, rather than constant verbal reassurance. Their silence is not always emptiness. Sometimes it is the sound of someone carefully carrying emotions that suddenly feel very important. In many situations, this quieter phase is actually a sign that the relationship has become meaningful to them. They are not necessarily pulling away from the person. They may simply be trying to understand how to handle emotions that feel bigger than anything they expected. Avoidant individuals often live with a deep internal conflict that many people never fully see. On one side, they genuinely desire love, closeness, and emotional connection, just like anyone else. They want to feel understood, valued, and emotionally safe with another person. But on the other side, intimacy can trigger fear. Vulnerability may feel dangerous to them because it involves emotional exposure, dependence, and the possibility of losing control or getting hurt. This creates a constant push and pull dynamic inside them, the desire to connect battling against the instinct to protect themselves. As relationships become more serious, this conflict usually intensifies. An avoidant person may feel deeply attached to someone while simultaneously fearing what that attachment means. They may worry about losing independence, being emotionally overwhelmed, or becoming too dependent on another person. Even when they truly care, part of them may still feel the urge to retreat emotionally whenever things become too intimate or emotionally demanding. Because of this, avoidants rarely express commitment through dramatic romantic gestures in the early stages. Their decision stage, the period where they quietly begin seeing someone as long-term or emotionally significant, is often much more subtle. Instead of making huge declarations of love, they communicate through small but meaningful acts of trust. One important sign is allowing someone into their personal world. Avoidants are usually highly protective of their private routines, thoughts, and emotional space. So when they start sharing personal experiences, introducing someone to important parts of their life, or allowing emotional access they normally avoid, it reflects growing trust. These moments may seem ordinary to others, but for avoidants they are emotionally significant. Another major step is asking for support. Avoidant individuals are often used to handling problems alone and relying heavily on self-sufficiency. When they begin turning to someone for comfort, advice, or emotional reassurance, it often signals that they are slowly lowering their emotional defenses. Planning for the future is another subtle but powerful indicator. They may casually mention future events, include someone in long-term plans, or begin considering another person when making decisions. These actions may not appear dramatic, but they reveal emotional investment and commitment in a way that feels safer for them. Ultimately, avoidants often love quietly. Their commitment is shown less through words and more through trust, consistency, and gradual emotional inclusion. What seems small on the surface may actually represent a major emotional breakthrough for them. One of the clearest signs that an avoidant person truly cares is not found in dramatic emotional speeches or constant reassurance. It is found in their willingness to stay during emotional tension. Avoidants are naturally uncomfortable with conflict, vulnerability, and emotionally intense situations. When relationships become emotionally charged, their first instinct is often to withdraw, create space, or shut down temporarily in order to regain emotional control. Because of this, many people assume that any emotional distance means the avoidant no longer cares. But that is not always true. What matters most is what happens after the tension. An avoidant who is not emotionally invested may leave completely, detach permanently, or avoid dealing with the relationship altogether. But an avoidant who genuinely sees long-term potential often does something very different. They come back. Even if they need time alone to process emotions, they eventually return to the conversation, revisit the issue, and try to reconnect. This behavior may not look emotionally dramatic, but for an avoidant person, it represents significant emotional effort. Conflict can feel overwhelming to avoidants because emotional intensity often activates fears they have carried for years. Fear of dependence, fear of losing freedom, fear of rejection, or fear of being emotionally consumed. During stressful moments, they may become quiet, distant, or emotionally hard to read. However, their willingness to re-engage after discomfort is extremely important. It shows that the relationship matters enough for them to work through emotions they would normally rather escape. Many avoidants also try to regulate themselves before responding. Instead of reacting impulsively, they often need time to calm their nervous system, organize their thoughts, and regain emotional balance. To a partner, this pause can feel frustrating or confusing, but for avoidants, taking space is often their way of preventing emotional overload rather than ending the connection entirely. Over time, their persistence becomes the real proof of attachment. They continue trying despite discomfort. They slowly learn healthier communication patterns, become more emotionally available, and attempt to stay connected even when situations feel difficult. These efforts may appear small compared to more openly expressive personalities, but they often carry deep meaning. In many ways, avoidants show love not by avoiding fear, but by remaining present despite it. Their decision to stay, return, and keep working through emotional discomfort is often the strongest indication that they truly see a future with someone.